Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. To work for, let's call him Damien, was seriously the worst human being ever. He would go out of his way to mess with people he didn't like for no good reason. So, a couple of years ago, I was at a family picnic in the park, walking around with my young cousin Tyler, who has Down syndrome. Despite his disability, Tyler's a good kid, but he gets really sensitive if anyone makes fun of how he looks or his condition. We were just strolling together enjoying the nice day. That's when Damien walks by, heading our way. I grimaced when I saw him, but still smiled and said hi, trying to be polite. Damien sneered, Well, if it isn't a couple of ugly idiot out for a walk." Tyler burst into tears as Damien laughed mockingly and kept going. I had to deal with comforting a sobbing Tyler while fuming inside. It took a few minutes, but I finally got him to calm down by reminding him that he's awesome and has us, his family who loves him. Damien was just a cruel stranger whose opinion didn't matter. We continued our walk, and I noticed Damien was at the park too, having a cookout with his wife and teenage daughter. He must have been coming back from the restroom when he saw us. I was pissed all over again. When we got back to our gathering area, I told my older cousin Jaden what that a-hole had done. Jaden wanted payback, but I warned him that Damien was my boss. If Damien realized I was involved, he'd make my work life even more miserable than it already was. So Jaden asked me for any useful info on Damien to get revenge anonymously. I filled Jaden in on some details, importantly that Damien loved to drink this locally brewed beer at a certain bar. Damien had mentioned being there the previous Friday night while his wife and daughter were visiting her family out of town. I also told Jaden about Damien's wife's obsession with this cartoon frog character. She apparently always kept a stuffed one, let's call it Grogu, on their bed. I wasn't there for the actual revenge part since I didn't want Damien to see me, but Jaden gave me the full rundown after. Jaden walks up to Damien and tries to put his arm around him like they're close friends or lovers. Damien shoves him off, looking confused. Damien: What the hell are you doing? His wife and daughter are watching now, concerned. Jaden: Oh baby, don't act like you don't remember me. Friday night was so much fun. Damien: What? I don't know what you're talking about, man. Jaden: Seriously? After all those local beer name you had at bar name, how could you forget what we did later? Damien, turning red: Nothing happened, you lying piece of... Damien's wife cuts him off. Excuse me, but you clearly have my husband confused with someone else. This is my husband. Please leave us alone. Jaden: No, there's no confusion. We had amazing sex on Friday night back at your place on Damien's Street. You know, the house with Grogu sitting on the bed? Jaden walks away as Damien's wife turns to him, stunned. Wife: Robert, what the duck? Are you gay now? You cheated on me? Long story short, Damien's wife was already fed up with his crap, and this was the final straw that made her file for divorce not long after. Over the next few months at work, Damien constantly whined about missing his daughter and hating his new apartment compared to his old house. But every time I thought to myself, you reap what you sow, Damien. That's what you get for bullying a disabled kid, you piece of garbage. The best part? He never realized I was the one who gave Jaden the info to mess with him so perfectly. Karma's a idiot. The next one is an entitled people story. I've lived in my current home for over 15 years now. It's a nice little place out in the countryside with plenty of land surrounding it. The peace and quiet is exactly what I was looking for when I moved out here. For most of those years, I didn't have any issues with my neighbors. Everyone mostly kept to themselves. That all changed when Betsy moved in next door. The day she moved in, I walked over to introduce myself and welcome her to the neighborhood. I figured it would be good to start things off politely. Boy, was I wrong. Hello there, I'm John, your neighbor from over there, I said warmly, pointing to my house. Just wanted to welcome you to the area. Betsy looked me up and down with a sour expression. Yeah, hi, she muttered before turning back to direct the movers. Well, that was a bit rude, I thought, but I brushed it off, assuming she was just stressed from the move. A few days later, I was doing some yard work when I noticed Betsy marching towards me. She did not look happy. What do you think you're doing? She demanded. I stared at her, confused. Just trimming the hedges around my property line, I explained. I don't think so, Betsy snapped. That's my land you're messing with. I won't have you trespassing on my property. Now I was really baffled. I'm sorry, but this is definitely my land, I said calmly. I've lived here for years, and this hedge marks the property line. Your land starts on the other side. Betsy's face turned red with anger. How dare you, she shrieked. I know exactly where my property ends, and you're clearly over the line. I tried to reason with her, but she just kept yelling about me trespassing. This went on for several minutes until she finally stomped back to her house, shouting threats over her shoulder. At first, I thought maybe she'd realize her mistake once she looked at the property maps. But over the next few weeks, Betsy continued to accuse me of trespassing anytime I did work near the property line. No matter how politely I tried to explain things, she refused to listen. One day, I was repairing part of my fence right along the property border. As expected, Betsy came rushing over immediately. "That's illegal!" she yelled. "Get away from my fence right now!" I sighed, feeling my patience wear thin. "Betsy, this is my fence on my land. Whether you want to accept it or not, you are mistaken." Betsy practically snarled at me. "That's it, I'm calling the police," she declared. "They'll sort out this trespassing situation real quick." I tried to protest, but she had already pulled out her phone and dialed cop. At this point, I figured I might as well let the cops come sort things out. Clearly, Betsy would not listen to reason. 15 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up the driveway. 2 officers got out and Betsy ran over to them right away. "Arrest this man immediately!" she demanded, pointing at me. "He's trespassing on my property and vandalizing my fence." One officer came over to speak with me. I calmly explained that I was just doing work on my own fence, which I proved was on my land according to the property lines. The officer nodded and said they would need to take a look themselves. I happily showed them the property map and the exact markers indicating the boundary between our lands. The second officer went to talk to Betsy, who was still ranting about me being arrested. I saw the color drain from her face as the officer no doubt explained that I was not in the wrong here. After reviewing the evidence, the police determined that the fence did indeed belong to me, just as I had said all along. They informed Betsy that she was mistaken about where her property ended. "There must be some mistake!" she cried desperately. "This can't be right!" But the officers stood firm. They warned Betsy that falsely calling the police could land her in trouble. She needed to control herself and not waste their time again. Betsy looked both furious and humiliated. She retreated into her house without another word. I thanked the officers profusely for their help. They advised me to consider legal action if Betsy continued to harass me over the property line. I hoped it wouldn't come to that, but I realized I might have no choice. Over the following weeks, Betsy remained hostile whenever we crossed paths. She gave me dirty looks and even knocked over my mailbox one day, but she didn't directly accuse me of anything after the police incident. However, the final straw came a month later. I awoke one morning to find half my hedge cut down. Betsy stood there, trimming away with vicious strokes of the shears. "What on earth are you doing?" I yelled. "Getting rid of this disgusting hedge," she shot back. I saw red. She had gone too far this time. I called the police and also contacted my lawyer to begin formal legal proceedings. Betsy was charged with destruction of property and trespassing. My lawyer advised that I could also sue her for damages in civil court. The lawsuit was a slam dunk thanks to all the documented incidents plus photo evidence of the trimmed hedge. Betsy tried to countersue me for harassment, but didn't have a leg to stand on. In the end, she was found guilty and ordered to pay me a hefty sum to replace the hedge and fence. The judge also granted me a restraining order to keep Betsy away from my property. Her reckless behavior had finally caught up with her. The day Betsy moved out, I stood in my yard and watched, feeling nothing but relief. Her empty house was a welcome sight after months of chaos. My new neighbors moved in a few weeks later, a friendly older couple who immediately acknowledged the property lines. I gifted them a bottle of wine as thanks for being normal, reasonable people. As for Betsy, I heard through the grapevine that she had pulled similar stunts at her new place. Some folks never learn, but at least I can enjoy my own home again now that she and her delusions are gone for good. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Back in the housing crisis of 2008, I did some work on the side for a customer's computer system. We got to talking, and he mentioned a cheap one-bedroom duplex for rent that seemed too good to be true. It was a detached garage converted into a small apartment and was as plain and basic as they come. The main house was being rented out, and he was charging the full amount typical for the area, which was high, so the little garage conversion was pure profit for the landlord. I signed a lease for a fixed price that was almost half of what the going rate was for one-bedroom apartments in the area. It was no frills, plain as can be, with the cheapest appliances and amenities possible. Light fixtures from the early 80s, the cheapest faucets and countertops money could buy. You get the picture. The elderly landlord and I had an arrangement. I could fix it up as long as I could keep the rent low, and he would allow me to pay for the remaining balance on upgrades if and when things broke. Years went by, and I was still in this one-bedroom garage conversion, making progress on updating the features. The kitchen faucet was replaced, a new fancy sprayer head faucet with a bar-style glass cleaner installed. The old toilet was replaced with a water-saving tank, and a bidet was installed. The 80s lights were gone, replaced with LED smart home fixtures. After about 7-8 years, my rent was still half of the normal going rate for the area, and my landlord was happy with our arrangement. Sadly, he had a heart attack, and though surgery saved his life, he was no longer able to maintain his active lifestyle and handed the reins of being a landlord over to a property management company. This company was as shady and money-hungry as they come. They got a percentage of the monthly rent for their role in taking over the landlord's duties. They immediately disliked me and my rental agreement from the start. The month they took over, my rent went up the maximum limit of 10% plus a 5% cost of living increase for 1 year. I was not happy with this significant bump in my costs. I sucked it up, but as a silent protest, I stopped making upgrades to the house that first year. 12 months later exactly, I received a notification that my rent would increase another 10% plus a 5% cost of living increase. This was yet another blow to my finances, but I could not really complain as my rent was still well below the average cost for the area. Another 12 months and another 10% plus 5% cost of living increase followed by another the following year. This whole time I had been saving a good portion of my paychecks as a down payment for a house, but these rent hikes were hurting my ability to set aside money for this purpose. My landlord was not happy with the property management company he hired, but couldn't get out of his contract because they were doing maintenance and facility repairs like clockwork. COVID hit, and I had been in this place for 12 years by this point. My rent was still under the average for the area, but not by much. Seeing as this was now just a crappy one-bedroom apartment, I was looking for houses to buy to get me out of this rent-gouging arrangement I was in. Right at the peak of the COVID scare in 2020, a pipe burst in the kitchen and flooded the floors, ruining the poor-quality cabinets, the carpets, and the furniture I had nearby. I had renter's insurance that covered most of the costs of what I had lost. Not the nicest furniture, but my couch was a total loss. My desk, entertainment center, and my speaker were severely damaged. Property management came in to assess the repairs and gut out the damaged wood and carpets. I offered to pay for the upgraded wood and countertops, as well as request hardwood floors. No, they denied my requests. I offered to do the work myself, as I'm fairly handy. Again, denied with an actual written letter stating I was not to do any work or maintenance on the apartment. I contacted my landlord, who had his hands tied because this was the arrangement we had. I was at a loss of what to do because this property management company was not setting me up with a temporary place to live, doing all the work while I was working from home to watch my possessions. There was a literal door-sized hole in my wall as they spent 2 weeks fixing all the damage. They threw out my upgraded faucet, which was undamaged and worked perfectly fine, the upgraded sink, the light fixtures, the tile work I had done, and the bathroom faucet, which wasn't even part of the floor damage. They then removed an outlet originally part of the apartment to save on costs. I was angry at them and complained via letters, phone calls, and talking to the maintenance supervisor. It took 2 full months to do all the repairs, and at the end, they sent me a notice that my rent was going up due to some loophole in the neglect the apartment was in and not reported. I was done with this nonsense and pooled my resources, called in all the favors I could, and found the house I wanted. I gave 30 days notice to leave at the end of my lease, along with an invoice of all the repairs I made to the apartment over the 12 years I was there. I attached a copy of my original lease agreement, a copy of all photos I took of before and after repairs I made, a bill of the costs, and a request for a refund of the past 6 months of additional rent hike due to neglect, like they stated in the letter. I had a running tally of all the receipts, work performed, and the cost of not being allowed to live in a motel during the work being performed, which amounted to over $9,700. At the same time, I submitted all this to the courts, as I knew they would contest all of it. My landlord was on my side during the court hearing, giving testimony that he, in fact, allowed me in the rental lease agreement to do my own repairs. I won within 4 hours and was awarded $4,700. The judge removed all billable hours I included. The judge was harsh to the lawyer for the property management, saying his client must obey the law and put a tenant up for housing during construction. Nearly 4 years later, I finally got my lump sum, including penalties and late fees, which totaled up to $7,500. Sadly, my old landlord passed away, and his properties passed to his son, who immediately fired the property management company sometime early last year. The next one is an entitled people story. I suddenly became a homeowner some time ago because a friend of mine's grandfather was moving to Florida, and his house was ripe for picking. I knew the old man well. R.I.P., he passed a few months later from a sudden stroke. Anyway, he offered the house and property to me for $200K. I practically ran to the bank to apply for the loan. The house is a manufactured home from the 80s, but it was remodeled repeatedly by the former owner and has a separate garage building. The home and property could have gone for more, but he offered the house to me because he knew I'd take care of it. I had $30K saved that made a good down payment, and I was happy to leave my apartment. I'd wanted to eventually move out of there after what my cheating ex did anyway. But that's a story for another time. As for my brother, well, he went bonkers when he found out I bought a house. He had this repeated history of copycatting me for the past decade, but there was no way in hell he could copycat buying a house with his terrible credit and inconsistent income. And he got in an argument with me over how I was just trying to make him look bad by doing something he couldn't. No, I just wanted a damn house, and the price was too good to refuse. Then he told me I should have turned it down because he had no good reason. I could practically see his screws getting looser with every dumbass excuse he made as to why I shouldn't have done it. But I pointed out all those excuses were just because I did something he currently can't. And when I bought the house, it had nothing to do with him. I just wanted to be a homeowner for the security and extra space. I finally don't have to store my camper at my parents' house. And I have a garage that I can store stuff and tinker in. I bought a camping cot, he bought a camping cot, went to the gym, he went to the gym, bought good booze, he bought good booze, or stole it from me. I bought a new TV. B bought a new TV. I bought a truck. He bought a truck. I bought a camper. He bought a camper. I bought a used portable DVD player. He bought a used portable DVD player. I went camping in a specific place. He went camping in that specific place. I bought a house. He 404 error, insert tea kettle noises, and Benny Hill chase. He also acted like a complete child toward me when he built his mini Ram thing. He actually confronted me and said it was cooler than my boring Tundra because it was something original. I swear he did the dumbest mods to that vehicle, like putting twist studs in the suspension coils to raise the ride height. Well, after weeks of openly fuming about me being a homeowner, my brother suddenly acted like he had another brilliant idea. He wanted to move in with me. I laughed at him. Then he ended up demanding I rent one of my rooms to him. And for only $200 a month, utilities included, because he shouldn't have to pay any more than that since we're family. He flipped his lid when I said, "Duck no." Then he got our parents involved again. Only this time, they actually sided with him at first. Though it was mainly our mother, she and my brother showed up demanding I let my brother move in, and my brother had a crap-eating grin on his face that I could tell he was thinking he was getting his way thanks to Mommy Dearest. I said, "Duck no," to both their faces, and my mother cried that I was using foul language to her and being an ass when I had the space now. I called my dad, and he told my mom that he'd warned her I wouldn't do it and to leave me the hell alone. Mom whined my brother was living out of his camper next to a shabby house he was renting space from. I said that wasn't my problem to fix, and my brother has proven countless times that he cannot be trusted. My brother was fuming to the point of being red with veins popping out. My mom tried one more time to convince me with tears, and that just made me angrier. I went on a rant that was something like this. Bro can't buy a house, so he wanted to invade mine. I refused to ever live with my brother again. I would sooner live in the woods without electricity than with him. He's intentionally irritating as all hell. And if I had him as a roommate, I just knew he'd steal my booze, take my stuff, and invade my privacy nonstop. Not ducking happening, no matter how many tears Mom tries using on me. My mom broke down and finally conceded she'd never convince me after that rant. And she had to take my brother by the hand and leave with him because he initially refused to go, and kept begging her to turn back and make me let him move in. And then I yelled to him that it was a laugh that he called me a mama's boy before, because he'd become exactly that. And this was just like the time he tried to get our mother to make me trade vehicles with him because he felt ashamed to be driving a minivan. He yanked away from Mom, then told me to go duck myself and the horse I rode in on. I laughed and pointed out I didn't ride in on anything because I was already home. But his rattle-can horse was waiting for him in the driveway. He flipped his lid again and looked like his head was going to explode. But Mom got in front of him and told him to just go. Then he drove off in his rattle-can Silverado without her. He'd driven her there. And then I had to take her home. While taking her home, I made things very clear with my mother over why I could never trust my brother again, and his life was not my burden to bear, and then told her how little my brother was offering for rent anyway, which he'd conveniently not told her. Then I later rented that same room to one of my best friends for $600 a month, and he pays for utilities. The other 2 rooms are my bedroom and a home office. There's an extra room in the separate garage too, so my mother tried to make me let my brother live in the garage instead. There's enough room in its storage room for a bedroom. Again, I said duck no, and that's since been turned into another friend's rented room with a bit of a plywood remodel. Yeah, I kinda rented both the spare bedroom and garage room out to friends out of spite, but I wasn't letting my brother live with me in any capacity. My brother later ended up having a complete meltdown in front of our parents over how he's the older brother. He should be the one who owns a house first. He's supposed to be successful, and I'm supposed to be the big loser in his shadow. Our dad poked him with his cane and told him that's not how life works, and they had a big argument. They told him to get out and not come back until he's cooled off and learned that he's just being a pointlessly jealous a-hole. The next part I post, my brother did the dumbest thing of all. The next one is an entitled people story. To add some context, I'm F25, and my parents are so crazy to the point to where me and the majority of my family had to cut them off. For me personally, my dad completely, and my mom calls on occasion. My mom also tries to overstep, such as inviting him to family events he's specifically not invited to. The reason is he tries to steer every conversation and attempts to talk about himself. People usually don't care or want to hear them. He argues with people, threatens their lives. And she purposely does these things knowing they'll cause an argument, and she gets joy out of it. So, needless to say, sane people don't want these issues in their lives. My dad is delusional and narcissistic to the point where he thinks he's famous and claims everyone runs up to him for pictures and says he's famous and someone he knows is making a movie about him. Lies about it, obviously, because no one has ever seen this and it's a running joke. People laugh at him, he thinks it's with him, not at him. He's lost all of his friends due to his poor behavior, such as arguments, belittling, non-stop phone calls. But to the story of his lies and delusions. I have an apartment, and I didn't give him my address because we aren't on speaking terms, and he threatened my life because I wouldn't give him my personal info, so he could take out loans in my name. Like, that's an obvious no. Also, I didn't grow up with him, so I barely know him. He has apparently told people he has an apartment, mine, that he lets his daughter, me, live in. This is what I've been told. He likes to pretend to be a big shot. So, I guess he told some people who needed a place to live they could stay at his spare apartment. He got my address from a family member, I assume my mom, due to the fact that no one I know speaks to him. One day, I get a call from my apartment building manager saying there are some people at the gate saying they're here to move into your unit. Is this correct? I was just as confused as she seemed, as well as the people he sent to live at my place. He somehow thinks it's his place. Mind you, it's my place. I pay the bills, and I didn't even know he knew my address. So I go out to meet these said guests, as there was much confusion. These 3 people, 3 random sketchy, older-looking men. Side note, I would at most let a friend stay a few nights if needed, not random strange men. I ask, what's going on? My building manager stayed because she wanted to know what's going on and wanted to help sort it out. And she would also know who's moving in and out because she's in charge of leasing, and the building isn't that big. We all know each other. The 3 men proceed to tell me they're moving in their place, we're here for the keys. His daughter, right? He said you'd be out by the time we got here and keys would be at the front desk. We all looked and I said, do you see a front desk? I asked to see what was the address. We thought maybe wrong address? Nope, my address. So the guy said, your dad said he kicked you out because you're freeloading and he had you leave the keys at the non-existent front desk. By this time, all 5 of us were confused, but they had my address. I said, he doesn't even have my address, so I don't know how he got it. By this time, they're trying to call him to sort it out. He's not answering at the moment. So, I explained to them, I don't know how you or he got this address. I haven't spoken to him in about a year, and I don't know how I'm freeloading or what he's told you. But this is my place. I don't know what's going on. Y'all need to figure it out with him, but I have no place for you. Sorry. They tried to get me to call him. I said no, and calling won't change anything, and this isn't my problem, so I can't help you. By the way, they didn't seem threatening. It was just random and weird for all. I hear one guy on the phone talking to my dad. I hear him telling him she's lying, etc. Ask her to show you the lease. At this point, me, one of the guys, and my building manager are all looking like, this is odd, and he looks embarrassed. My manager stepped in at this time, luckily. She told the men, you all must have the wrong place. She's on the lease, the only one. You'll all have to leave and sort it out. I can say, despite them looking sketchy initially, they were as calm as could be in their odd situation. Because, in all honesty, the only fault they had was believing my dad. They thought they were moving into an apartment for free. If I was in that situation, I wouldn't be happy either. After apologizing and before leaving, I heard one of them saying, I knew something was up, he's always lying. I asked, what did he tell you? One of the men said he told me he had a spot for him to move in, all furnished and paid for, up to the rest of the year. I kicked my daughter out because she's freeloading, but claimed he couldn't get out of the lease. I said something like, well, like your friend said, he is a liar. I don't know how, why, and what made him do this. I never gave him my address. He isn't on a lease. I don't even talk to him. So, I'm sorry, but hope it works out. I don't know what my dad thought would happen. But like I said, he's delusional. He probably assumed all he was saying was true. Or maybe he assumed there was a front desk and whoever was at the front desk would just magically let 3 random people in. And I'd have no say? It's also crazy that I can't even attempt to understand. There's no use. Lol. Also, I told my manager thanks, and if anyone ever comes when I'm not home, please give me a call or call 911. If I have a guest coming, I'll be home to greet them. The next story is titled, Neighbor Demolished My Cabin and Stole My Land While I Was Absent. He Loses Everything. The Plot to Steal My Land. A story of betrayal, courage, and triumph. I never could have imagined the dark turn of events that would come from a gift from my grandfather. I was gifted with a piece of land that had been in our family for generations, a small piece of paradise that I had been visiting since I was a child. I was overjoyed at the idea of owning a piece of my family's heritage and decided that I wanted to keep it for myself. I didn't want to live on the land full time, but I couldn't bear to part with it, so I decided to build a cozy cabin where I could escape to for a few days each year. At first, everything seemed perfect. The surrounding community was friendly and welcoming, including my grandfather's old neighbor who offered to keep an eye on the land when I wasn't there. I took him up on his offer, grateful for the extra set of eyes to keep an eye on my little piece of heaven. Little did I know that he had something far more sinister in mind. 2 years after receiving the land, I made the journey down to my cabin for a much-needed break. When I arrived, I was shocked to find that my cabin was gone, replaced by a large, imposing house that took up the entire property. I approached the door, rang the doorbell, and was greeted by a man who appeared confused by my presence. "What are you doing here?" he asked, with a hint of suspicion in his voice. "That's what I was going to ask you," I replied. "This is my land, and I want to know what's going on." The man told me that the land wasn't mine and that it belonged to his cousin. He warned me that if I tried to come back, he wouldn't be so polite the next time. I was intimidated by the man's size and didn't want to get into a physical altercation, so I backed off and sat in my car, feeling lost and confused. It was then that another of my grandfather's neighbors walked by and recognized me. She invited me in for a meal and told me the whole story. It turned out that the man who had answered the door was part of a plot to steal my land. He had spread false stories about being my grandfather's closest friend and that he had been left the land. He had even gone so far as to forge fake documents to prove his claims. While I was away, he had demolished my cabin and built a house for his family to use. I was filled with a sense of anger and determination. I knew that I had to fight for what was rightfully mine, and I wouldn't stop until I had won. I went into town and spent the next few days gathering evidence and fighting to prove that the land was mine. Eventually, I was successful, and the family was forced to leave the house that had been built illegally on my land. However, my fight was far from over. I had to sue the man for tearing down my cabin, building a house illegally on my land, and using my land without permission. He tried to argue that the land was legally abandoned because I wasn't there to maintain it, but I was able to show the actual papers that proved it was mine. In the end, I won the case and made sure that the man was held accountable for his actions. I was able to reclaim my land and make sure that my family's legacy would continue. But I wasn't satisfied with just reclaiming my land and making the man pay for his actions. I wanted to teach him a lesson that he would never forget, so I rebuilt my cabin, but this time I made it stronger and more beautiful than ever. I wanted to show him that I wouldn't be defeated, that I was stronger than the trials he had put me through. The day I moved into my cabin was one of the proudest moments of my life. The man who had betrayed me and tried to steal my land saw what I had done and knew that he had lost. He had underestimated the power of a person who stood up for what was right and wouldn't be defeated by adversity. My story became a legend in the small community, and people often came to visit and hear about the incredible courage and triumph that I had shown. I was proud to be known as the person who stood up to a corrupt system and won. And every time I looked out the window of my cabin, I was reminded of the incredible journey I had taken and the lesson I had learned. That no one can take away what is rightfully yours, and that if you stand up for what you believe in, you can overcome any obstacle. The next story is titled, Entitled Ex-Husband Gets What He Deserves. After dealing with my husband, 29M, cheating on me and loudly disrespecting me for 2 years, I, 23F, finally left him 4 months ago. He assumed no responsibility for the marital bills, and I had to sell the house and his truck by myself. When I left him, there was also a $400 phone bill in both of our names. I ended up just paying the overdue bill a few months ago under the stipulation that my ex-husband gives me $200 for his share. He did give me $90, but then he laughed at me for expecting him to pay the other $110, stating that he doesn't owe me anything. About a week ago, I went into the store of my current cell phone provider and learned that I am paying twice as much as I should be paying for phone service because I'm still being charged $40 a month for my ex-husband's phone. There's still $800 plus owed on it. I learned that the remaining balance was not transferred over when he switched his phone number to his own account because he failed to sign the required paperwork. I explained the situation to my ex-husband, and he was more than willing to join a conference call with me and customer service to get the remaining balance transferred to his own account. We had spent approximately 20 minutes on the phone before my ex-husband told the customer service woman that he's making payments on his own phone through his own account, that he doesn't have a clue what I'm talking about, and that whatever I have called to inquire about, it is clearly not even his business. Then he hung up. So today, I spoke with customer service again and learned that I technically own my ex-husband's phone, since it is in my name. So I made a police report, I reported the phone as stolen, and it is now flagged and shut off. The last story is titled, I Don't Care What You Are, You Can't Park in My Spot. I am a paramedic in a place that has some HOAs and apartment complexes. We hate responding to the apartment complexes because there's nothing but assigned parking and no fire zones. Basically, if we can't find a space to fit in, we have to block the road. My agency also uses first responder vehicles and ambulances. The first responder, as implied, usually arrives first, so we do our best to leave room for the ambulance to fit in. We get a call at the apartment complex, I am in the first responder. As I pull up to the address, by some miracle, there is a spot only 2 apartments away. Great, I can leave the road clear for the ambulance. As soon as I park, out comes this guy screaming I can't park there. I do the, are you serious? Look and just say medical emergency. He says he doesn't care, I can't park there. Keep in mind, my vehicle has enough lights to make a Christmas tree jealous. I just grab my stuff, lock the vehicle, and keep going. He's screaming he's going to call the cops. I tell him they're already on the way. They respond to medical emergencies. Cop gets there while I'm in the patent and tells him basically to pound salt. The cop enters the apartment, and then this guy really goes full-blown entitled. He enters the apartment, comes into the room where I'm treating the patient. He starts ranting and raving about how I have to move my vehicle. I look at the cop and say, get him out of here. The cop then seals his fate. She asks the patient if she wants this person removed from the apartment, and did she ever give consent for him to enter. The patient's response, get him the duck out, he's trespassing. Boom, all clear. The cop gives him one last chance and tells him to leave or he will be arrested. He doubles down. I am on the HOA board. I can go where I please. At this point, backup is called. The cop at least manhandles him out of the room. The ambulance arrives with PD backup and they get him out of the apartment so we can safely remove the patient. Not entirely sure what happened next as I was in the back of the ambulance, but when I got out, one of the officers approaches and says, sorry, but we need another bus. We had to tase him. Policy for PD is if they tase someone, they have to be transported to the hospital by ambulance as the taser spikes have to be surgically removed due to the barbs on them. Wait for the second ambulance, they take him, I go back in service. Found out a few weeks later he was charged with trespassing, assaulting an officer, resisting arrest, interference with government administration, aka interfering with the scene of an emergency. All over a parking space that I would have been in for all of 20 minutes if he hadn't created problems. I can only assume he took a plea deal as I was never called to testify. The next one is an entitled People Story. A long time ago, I was washing dishes in a Denny's restaurant. As dishwashers, we were allowed 1 soda per shift. My work partner and I kept our sodas on a little shelf near where the busboys would put the full tubs of dishes. One of them thought it was funny to put down the bus tub, pick up our soda and drink half of it, put it back on the shelf, and run away laughing. I asked him not to do it several times. He kept doing it. But instead of getting mad, I got even. Restaurants buy cases of frozen steaks and set them out to thaw in big stainless steel tubs. After all the steaks are taken out and cooked, there's usually a 1/4 inch of blood with miscellaneous bits in it left in the bottom of the pan. I grabbed a glass out of the bus tub that had ice in it, poured it full of old cow blood, added a straw, and put it in the usual spot. Same guy comes running back with a tub of dishes, puts it down, and grabbed the glass. I yell across the kitchen at him, "Don't drink that!" And he just laughed at me and chugged about half of it, like he usually did. He got a real funny look on his face and asked me, "What was that?" "Cow blood. Want some more?" I replied, and tipped the pan up so he could see the cascade of gristly bits and old blood running to the bottom. He headed straight for the nearest trash can, and I think he threw up everything he had eaten in the last week. Took him about 10 minutes. On the bright side, the busboys quit drinking our sodas after that. The next story is titled, "Move Your Lousy GF Here and Never Want to Spend Time at Her Place? Think Again." Back in college, I was living in a house with 3 of my friends. One of these friends was a bad roommate. Never cleaned, never chipped in on shared resources, cleaning supplies, etc. You get the gist. Well, it became even more unbearable to live with him when he decided to have his girlfriend move in without consulting any of us. She never contributed to rent and also didn't clean. He gave her his copy of our house key and she moved in. Even after attempts of talking to him about it, he didn't agree with us. We'd ask why they couldn't spend some time at her place, and he said it was because she lived with her parents on the other side of town. Our house had 3 floors, and each floor had a door that was unlocked by the house key. The house also had a front door that was always unlocked that none of us had a key to. Roommate and his girlfriend would always go out at night and come back late. Maybe you can see my petty revenge brewing already. One night, they went out, and I decided to lock the front door so they couldn't get back in. In the wee hours of the morning, they tried to come back, but the front door was locked. After banging on the door, trying to throw rocks at our windows, etc., they finally gave up, and he was forced to go back to her place where he should have been all along. Had to get an Uber to go all the way to the other side of town, too. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. The next story is titled, "Ghost Me. I Don't Know You Anymore." Posted this as a comment on another sub, but was made aware that it will fit here. Boy, we were just done with school, so young and innocent still, maybe me more than him. Or I should call it childish. Took me out on a few dates. We kissed and danced and just had fun. About a month in, my family and I went on a trip that was planned months in advance, and he still had to work. There was no cell reception where we went. I was walking on sunshine. Came back after 4 days. He and our other friends came to tell me that he started seeing one of our friends' friends in the meantime. Crushed me. Invited me to a party or sleepover that night, which I declined as I didn't want to see the new couple. Next day, he left without saying goodbye. Turns out he knew his dad was going to ship him off to his mom 13 hours away, and he obviously wanted to make the most of his time left, instead of dating the invisible girl. None of us knew until after he left. Completely ghosted all of us. About 2 or 3 years later, he came to visit his dad, who was still living down the street. He came to say hi. He dropped by every year before Christmas, but fortunately, I always missed him. I almost fell on my back when I saw him, but pulled myself together and decided to pretend that I don't recognize him. The more he tried explaining who he was, the more I pretended to assume he is a friend of my brother's and apologizing for not knowing all said brother's friends. He couldn't say too much as his new girlfriend was right next to him. After a minute or two, he gave up and let me call my brother, whom he was also friends with back then. They spoke a minute or two, and he left in a hurry. I never saw him again. The next story is titled, "Neighbors Steal My Parents' Property." Claims he's the landowner and calls 911 on them for trespassing. There are not many things in life that can get me angry over the top, but messing with my parents is one of them. I hate when people dare to be annoying or talk down to them. My parents are in their 80s, but healthy and still managing to live in their own home alone. While I don't live with them and never met their neighbor in my entire life, he only had to do one thing to become my enemy. I guess he thought messing with the 2 old people next door would mean he could get away with it without a single problem. He probably didn't even know of my existence, but he found out sooner or later. My mother called me one day telling me that neighbor had started putting up posts and saying it was where his new fence would go. The only thing is that it was way onto my parents' property, and it would end up digging up half of their driveway. They have a little bit of an odd driveway where it wraps all the way into the back of the house, since their garage is back-facing for some reason. His new fence was going to be where my parents had concrete and wouldn't allow them enough clearance to get their car back to the garage. On the behalf of my parents, I decided to go next door and talk to the neighbor myself. My idea at the time was maybe if he realized they had somebody helping advocate for them, he would realize they weren't such an easy target and back down. I still think that it might have worked if I was a big, strong-looking guy, but I wasn't. I was the exact opposite. I looked like I couldn't even talk to you, maybe only pet your cat. Not even your cat, because cats are mean. Your fish or something. Me. Excuse me, I want to talk to you about this new fence you're building. Neighbor. Are you the guy from the company? I thought you were coming over later, but I can show you where I want it so you can order the right amount of wood. Me. Actually, I'm the son of the couple that lives next door to you. Your fence plan is way on their side of the property, and I want to just tell you that if you build that fence, I'm going to make sure that you don't get away with it. He expectedly laughed in my face and closed the door on me. I just wanted to be nice enough to give him a fair warning before I moved forward with the process of destroying him. I know that he didn't see me as a threat, but he must have had something in the back of his mind telling him that there might be a problem because he put off the actual destruction of land and building of the fence. My wife was a lawyer, and when I went home, I talked to her about what steps would be best to take. First, we decided that it was best to have all the paperwork related to the land in hand. My parents needed to have all the documents necessary just to be sure no one could fool them. We decided to have a survey, and then see how we approach the situation. Unfortunately, it took a while to get the survey, and in the meantime, neighbor, I guess, wasn't worried anymore, and started destroying my parents' property to build his fence. When the report came back, it turned out that not only did my parents own the land he was building the fence on, but also owned a small portion of my neighbor's property as well. I took the report and brought it to neighbor, warning him one last time to stop what he was doing and pay for the repairs for the damage he had done. I guess this guy was pretty cocky, because even with proof in front of his face, he didn't care, and told me to not come to his house again or else he would call the police. I hired a lawyer and we started doing all the necessary legal steps. A formal document was sent to neighbor requesting to put a stop to his construction and pay the money for damages. Once that got ignored, we were able to take him to court where a judge would force him to accept what was on the document. There was no question of if he was going to have to stop and pay to fix my parents' driveway. With what the survey found, though, there was something else potentially at play. Neighbor had a whole area built for barbecues in his yard that was crossing his property line into my parents', which was perfect, as once with the fence, we could also destroy his barbecue area. My parents are both some nice and kind people, and didn't want to destroy his barbecue, but they also didn't want him to build on their property. As the lawyer was getting the case ready and we waited for a date, some other things happened. The neighbor continued building the fence without a problem. And one morning, my mother wanted to have a little picnic on the grass in the yard. The neighbor saw her and quickly called the police, telling them that my mom was trespassing. When the police came, my mom explained to them everything about the fence and the lawsuit. The police left and encouraged my mom to enjoy her picnic, but she couldn't, as he kept insisting and shouting at her. And that's when my mom called. When I heard what she said, I drove there as fast as I could. Me. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? Neighbor. That's my property, and I don't want your old mother on it. After hearing those words, I called my lawyer and asked him to speed up the process. And then finally, the day came. The lawyer was more than capable of destroying neighbor than I would have imagined. The only defense he really had was his survey that was from an unreliable source. When he tried to argue there was no way for him to know that his wasn't accurate, my lawyer showed that he signed the certified mail that included a survey as well as legal documents stating to stop his construction. His other argument was that he needed a fence to be placed there due to trash, noise, and other annoying things my parents supposedly do. The judge didn't seem convinced that two elderly people were being so loud or unpleasant that a fence needed to be built. But anyway, it didn't matter even if his arguments would have been good because he was building on their property. But of course, as expected, he lost. He had to pay to have the driveway fully repaired, his barbecue removed, and a new fence was built, now much closer to his house than he wanted it to be. My parents were just happy to get some peace, and I was glad neighbor learned not to mess with them. Just because your neighbors might be old doesn't mean that they're easy targets to take advantage of. Stop messing with older people, they're tired enough. They don't need all your drama crap. TLDR, after my parents' neighbor tried to build a fence on their property, I warned him to stop, and he doesn't listen to me, so I prepare to sue him. I get a land survey that shows that he's building on their property, and that even a part of his barbecue area is passing on their property too. He doesn't stop again after a formal warning, so we end up in court. His excuses get brushed off by the judge, and he's told that he's fully in the wrong. He must pay to repair the damage he caused to my parents' driveway and remove his barbecue. And so, my parents' driveway and silence are once again safe, and I'm a happy son. The next story is titled, Drink My Coffee? Enjoy gagging on a vile cocktail. Never thought I would post something in this sub, but here you go. My routine to get coffee is usually like this. I take my water bottle and fill it up, get a cup of coffee. I prepare it by adding 1 spoon of sugar, 1 shot of black coffee, which is basically an espresso shot, and then a cup full of strong coffee setting. Perfect for how I like it. I bring the coffee and my bottle to my desk, and then go off to pee. That way the sugar dissolves and the coffee cools a bit too. I have a colleague who's also become a close friend. He started this annoying thing to take a sip from my coffee. He doesn't like coffee, doesn't drink it, a tea guy through and through. When I come back from the washroom, he'll grin at me and then take a sip. He only does it to annoy me, and it works. Well, today I put 2 shots of espresso and then used the strong tea setting on the coffee/tea machine. Presenting to you a real cocktail from Taste Hell. I kept the cup of vile liquid on my desk and went to pee. As I come back, my colleague grins at me, picks up the cup, takes a sip, and spews it out. It was glorious. Hopefully he's learned his lesson. The last story is titled, Doing What I Want. I have a friend who used to tell me I couldn't listen to the same music as her because then I was copying her. I started to believe her and stopped myself from enjoying the music I liked because she was somehow entitled to that genre. Lol, this is incredibly childish, and I'm aware of that now, so I woke up one day and decided not to let this have any power over me at all. I posted a photo on my story showing off that I listen to a band she also likes. She has yet to respond to that story. I don't even know if this counts as a form of revenge, but I wanted to post because I'm proud of myself. I'm no longer going to stop myself from expressing myself the way I want to. So, I'm going to do it, regardless of what she thinks about it. The next one is an entitled People Story. Some years ago, I dated a girl. The relationship was bad, she was very controlling and abusive, it ended up really bad, and we broke up. I kept going on with my life, and after some years I got a decent job, enough to solve all my needs, have a comfortable life, and make some savings. The thing is, a couple months after getting my job, my ex contacted me. She first asked me to talk. I believed that she may want to reconnect or something, but she showed up with a 5-year-old child, claiming he was my son and demanding for child support. I didn't believe her, but the child age matched the time since we had cut contact. I got advice from a lawyer, a friend of mine, to try to solve this out of the court. I offered to take responsibility, pay all the costs, and being an active part of the kid's life only after making a DNA test. Everyone was okay with this except for my ex. She acted offended and demanded to just give her the money she deserved. She used all the excuses she could, even contacted my family and told them I was trying to avoid taking responsibility of her child. When she ran out of excuses and the DNA test was finally made, surprise, I'm not the father. She was so mad with the result and cried about the money, saying it was unfair and she deserved it. But she didn't accomplish anything. Moving on to last week, there was a little party at my parents' house. My brother, a friend, and I were talking, and my brother started to joke about the situation with my ex. My friend and I started to joke about it too. Some of our comments were a little dark and bad, but we were far away from the rest of the people. Literally, we were on the opposite side of the house, and nobody else could hear us. At least that was what we thought. We were laughing like crazies when my sister appeared, very angry, and pushed me against the wall. She spied us and heard our conversation, and she was really mad. She started to yell at us about how horrible we were as people for mocking a poor woman. A few hours later, when the party ended, she asked me to go to the kitchen with our parents, and she started to say how awful I was for the previous situation. Apparently, my ex had been in contact with her, and she believed her version, and that was her way to have an intervention. My brother and I were like, "Are you serious?" when she started to say how I forced my ex into being a single mother and that I have the moral obligation to help her. My dad only said that maybe we were being a bit too cruel making jokes of her, but that I wasn't responsible for that kid. My mom then surprised all of us when she said, "Even if the kid is not yours, you're making more than enough money to support the child. You should have helped her." Since then, I had been receiving texts. My dad and my brother are on my side, saying I'm not responsible for her, but my sister is telling me how horrible I am for ruining their lives. My mom only said, "It's your decision and I respect it. I'm just very disappointed that you ended up being so selfish." I'm aware that she doesn't deserve my money and I'm not planning to give her any, but the constant harassment of my sister trying to guilt me, it's just exhausting. The next story is titled, "Try to Steal My Apartment from Under Me?" Lol. Back in the mid-90s, I was a single guy in my late 20s, and if I'm being honest, a bit of a man-child. I had a job that paid just enough for me to pay rent and go out drinking every night. I was a regular at a bar, and it was there that I met two ladies who were around my age. They had just had their roommate move out unexpectedly, and they were looking for someone to fill the vacancy in their 3-bedroom apartment. The rent was cheap, only $350 a month for each of us, and the location was ideal, close to everything. Plus, the heat and electric were paid for by the doctor's office below us, making it a unicorn of a place for me, especially since I was paying that alone and utilities at my previous place. I jumped at the opportunity and moved in. On my first day, the ladies had me sign the lease, which I knew was a bit shady from the start. The lease was a copy with the old roommate's name whited out, and I was told I couldn't contact the landlord myself. Despite my reservations, I signed the lease and paid $200 for the deposit and the first month's rent. Living with the ladies was an experience, to say the least. They were quirky and lazy, and they seemed to think they owned me. They would constantly ask me where I had been, who I was dating, and why I was coming home at 6 a.m. even though I worked swing shift. They would spend all day and night on AOL Instant Messenger, tying up the phone lines, leaving garbage and clutter in the common areas, and not cleaning up their dirty dishes. Despite their mess, they would scold me for leaving my shoes or coat out. I tried to avoid leaving my stuff out, but would occasionally forget, and they would still mention it. To make things worse, one of their cousins would stay over 2 to 5 times a week, which was just annoying. But the rent was cheap and I barely saw them, so I didn't mind too much. The worst part was the passive-aggressive notes they would leave me, like, "Hey, please don't leave your shoes out by the couch. I almost tripped on them this morning." The place was cluttered with their mess, but my shoes were the problem. It got even worse when I started dating the person who would become my wife. They were jealous and would try to break us up. For example, one morning my girlfriend called me and the ladies answered the phone saying that I never came home after meeting a girl at the bar. Of course, this was untrue and my girlfriend knew it because she had dropped me off for my night shift the night before. There were many similar instances, but I won't go into detail about all of them. The lease was up in a month and the ladies decided they were moving out, meaning I would have to move out too. When I asked if I could take over the rent, they said that the landlord had already leased the place to someone else. So I finally called the landlord myself and found out that she only knew I was living there because she received my rent check every month. I made them out to cash and the roommates were too lazy to cash them before giving them to the landlord. She told me that she had not leased out the apartment and hadn't received any notice from the ladies that they were moving out, but their cousin was wanting to sign a lease. That's when I decided to get my revenge. I found out that the ladies had been scamming the landlord and their former roommate by collecting rent money and keeping it for themselves. They had been living in the apartment for free while charging others for the same living space. This was the final straw for me. I reported the situation to the landlord, who was shocked and grateful. She immediately evicted the ladies and their cousin, and she also thanked me for bringing the situation to her attention. But I wasn't satisfied with just reporting them. I wanted to make sure that they would never be able to scam anyone again. So I took to the internet and posted their names, faces, and the details of their scam on a popular pro-revenge subreddit. I made sure to include all the evidence I had collected, including copies of the lease and the notes they left me. The post quickly went viral, and I received hundreds of messages of support and thanks from people who had been scammed by these ladies in the past. A few days later, I received a call from the local news station. They had picked up my story and wanted to do a follow-up. I agreed, and the ladies were publicly exposed on the news, ruining their reputation, making it nearly impossible for them to scam anyone again. It was a small victory, but it felt good to know that I had stood up for what was right and protected others from being scammed. In the end, I moved out and found a much better place to live. I never heard from the ladies again, but I heard through the grapevine that they had moved out of town and changed their names. I felt a sense of closure and satisfaction knowing that I had gotten my revenge and prevented them from hurting anyone else. The next story is titled, "Evil Mama Bear Told Me to Use My Own Money." So, I did. As many know, my sister tried to get money out of me a lot when we were kids, and she never wanted to pay back any loans, so I almost never loaned her anything. On this day, I was 14 and was essentially babysitting my sister around the mall. It was a Saturday and my dad was at work. EMB wanted to get her hair and nails done, so she told me to walk my sister around the mall. We went to a few places and my sister blew through $40 pretty much right away. Then she tried to drag me into a lingerie store. Yeah, my 11-year-old sister tried to take me to look at ladies' underwear. I refused to go in and she pouted. So we went to the food court. Sis went for her favorite food there, and I got a burger, if I recall correctly. Then, Sis dragged me around some more, and we went to the video store. She wanted to buy a DVD of a new movie that was released at the time, but pretty quickly noticed she'd blown through half of her money in one day. So, she asked me to buy the DVD. I don't remember what it was, but I do remember not wanting it. Sis tried to say that it'd be a family DVD we could watch together. I still said I wasn't buying it, so she had a tantrum, but I just ignored it. Following that, we went to the game store, and while there, Sis found a video game she really wanted, but I did not. I think it was a Grand Theft Auto game or something, but I was, and still am, bored by those. And besides, I couldn't even buy it for her even if I wanted to because it was an M-rated game, and you had to be an adult to buy it. She had another fit, and then we met back up with EMB. Sis cried to her that I didn't buy her anything and she was low on cash. I said it wasn't my job to buy her anything and she had her own money. Sis whined about how badly she wanted the DVD and how we could have watched it together. EMB tried to order me to just go buy the DVD by saying it didn't matter if I used my own money or not if it was going to be a family-used DVD. I told her I didn't care and it wasn't even a movie I wanted to see. EMB got in my face and again ordered me to go buy the DVD with my own money while pointing in the direction of the video store. So I just laughed and said that I would not. Even through all the makeup on her face, I could see how red she was turning. Then I said I would use my own money, the way I want to, and just started walking. I walked straight back to the video store, bought a much cheaper used anime DVD that I wanted instead, then went back to the game store and bought a used copy of Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Back then a used copy still only cost $20. Well, my Legend of Karen's mother called me selfish and said I was a bad brother. I just reminded her how my money was my own, and even Dad tells her that. I won't spend it on anything I don't want. We left the mall and both my mother and sister refused to speak to me for the rest of the day. I took the GameCube into my room and had a blast playing Zelda. We did have another copy of that same game, but my sister liked to hoard it for some reason because she knew I liked playing it. Whenever I mentioned I wanted to play certain games, my sister suddenly had a renewed interest in them, and then insisted on playing them again first. So getting my own copies when I could was a must because I could keep them in my room. Still have that Wind Waker game too, as it was one of the few games my sister managed to not steal or break when she stole the Xbox 360 and destroyed 3 other game systems at my dad's house. The next story is titled, My Dad is Kicking Me Out. I'm leaving a gift. His long-distance girlfriend is moving in December from overseas, and because my father is a liar, she falsely believes that my room was used by his ex and that she had since moved out. The truth is that they were sharing his bed until last week while I lived in the other room. And so, to keep up the ruse, he told me yesterday that I had 2 weeks to clear out my room, take my belongings, and leave no trace of my existence behind in the apartment. His girlfriend is apparently a clean freak, and my dad is desperate to make a good impression. Hence me getting kicked out. So right before I leave, there's going to be an accidental spill of tuna juice on the living room rug, and there will be honey and sugar in inconspicuous corners. I think the ants will love it. Hopefully the tuna juice will go bad and make the whole place slowly stink over the course of several weeks for no reason, and hopefully my dad will be embarrassed and miserable. The next story is titled, Life as a Flea Market Worker. I help my parents sell company return items in a flea market, and I wanted to share some of the most annoying and funny interactions. Even though items are labeled as returns, sometimes they can be overstock or canceled orders and they're still sealed or in pristine condition. I always test the items before I bring them to the market, or I sell them dirt cheap and inform the customer that I do not know the condition of the item. This one happened today, and I didn't really know what to say to her. Karen was looking at the headphones I was selling and sees that I have Apple AirPods, and she asked me if they were real. And I told her the ones she was pointing at were real, and I have fake ones on the other side. Some people don't want to spend that much on a headphone, which is understandable. That's why I have the fake ones. She looked at me disgusted and said, "Ew, I don't want those fake ones. How much are the real ones?" I told her that they were $80, and she got pissed for some reason. She said, word by word, no headphone should be that expensive. $20, take it or leave it. At this point, I was kind of annoyed because I live in Texas, and it's not fun to spend 8+ hours in that heat and argue with stupid people. I told her that I sell the fake ones for that much, and there's no way I'm selling them for $20. FYI, the AirPods were 2nd-gen ones, and they were open box new. The wrapping paper around the headphone was still there, and it had 3 months of warranty left. She ugged and started to look at the other headphones I have, and saw the Powerbeats Pros, which are the second most expensive headphones I have. The first one being Sony WH-1000 XM4s. She asked me if I could do $20 for that one. I told her that since they're still sealed, I'm asking $150 for those, and she had a shocked face. She left angrily and I didn't see her again, fortunately. The next one is an entitled people story.
I worked at a pet insurance company a couple of years ago. Anyone who has worked in customer services or in insurance will know. It's a job from hell. People yell at you for things the accounting team have messed up, for things the policy writers have done, for literally anything that you can't control. But such is the life with dealing with the general public. One day I was connected to Telephone Karen, who immediately replied to my cheery greeting with a pissed-off attitude. I knew immediately that the call was going to be a rough one. She told me she took the large, older dog into the vet for a problem the day before, and it turned out her policy didn't cover what she needed for her large dog anymore, as she was getting older, so she wanted to switch policies. I told her I could do that for her, no problem. However, whatever the condition was that she got checked out the day before won't be covered, as it would be listed as a pre-existing condition, which means anything that was diagnosed or found to be relating to a condition noted down within the past 2 years. That simply would not do for Telephone Karen. She started negotiating what she wanted me to do, which was essentially to move her over to another policy, one that would cover the condition her old dog was going to have for the rest of his life. It seems all the previous conditions too. And if I could take the price down a bit, that would be great. I told her there really are only 2 options: to keep the policy she had, as it did cover a bunch of other things for her dog that I could see in this file, or cancel and have no conditions the dog has been diagnosed with in the last 2 years covered at all, with any other policy she would take out, with our company or otherwise. I explained that there was literally nothing else I could do. Those were the policies as they were written, and I did not make the rules. My telephone manner was calm and polite. I didn't go out of my way to make her mad, just gave her the facts. Telephone Karen started yelling demands and all sorts of curses down the phone, at which point I turned the call's volume down a bit and checked my phone for messages and stuff. This is common. We customer service reps do not have to be at full attention if you're going to come at us with total nonsense. When Telephone Karen had finished, I reiterated the policies and my lack of control to do anything other than the options I gave. She screamed, literally screamed in my ears, "Just go ahead and cancel the policy then, you bitch," and hung up on me. The rules for cancellations were very clear in my job. If a customer said they wanted to cancel, we had to do it immediately. If we did not, and another payment goes out, etc., we, as individuals, could be sued and lose our job in the same day. So I asked my manager over and explained the situation that I thought TK had told me to cancel out of distress, and she confirmed. I had to. If she asked me to, it didn't matter in what context. So that's exactly what I did. I had it on record that she asked, well, screamed at, me to do it, and we had to cancel a policy if a customer asked us to. I knew the cancellation email had reached her as soon as one of my desk mates flinched after they greeted a new caller. I had a sense that Telephone Karen was about to claim another victim with her screeches, so I motioned for them to transfer her to me. I greeted her cheerily again, and she seemed to get even more angry than before. Hearing that she had been transferred to the person who had followed her idiotic order, she asked me, who do I think I am, canceling her policy without her permission, and I reminded her that that was the last thing that she asked of me before she hung up on our previous call. That made her all the more irate. She demanded I reinstate the policy, but I couldn't. It was canceled. The deed was done. I told her I could set up a new policy, and she begrudgingly said fine, and while I ran through the policy she wanted, I went through the script we have when setting up a policy, and at the part where I said, and no conditions that have been diagnosed or been linked to a condition in the last 2 years will be covered. Telephone Karen interrupted me and asked the conditions her dog had previously been covered would still be covered, right? Right? Wrong, idiots? They're all now pre-existing conditions. Telephone Karen lost her mind. And blinded all over. She wanted to speak to the manager, who I'd messaged with the situation all along, as I knew TK was going to ask for a manager. They always do. The manager told her the same thing I did. I'd canceled the policy and she had asked me to, as we legally had to. I was listening to the conversation and TK said, "But I said that when I was angry at that other woman. I didn't mean her to actually cancel my policy." To which my manager replied, "Well, I'm sorry about that, but keep this as a lesson for the next time so you'll have the mind to stop and calm yourself down before you say something you'll regret." Moral of the story: just because you say something you don't mean doesn't mean it doesn't have consequences. Think before you speak to people who are just doing their jobs and don't have any wiggle room on policies that they don't write and can't change. The next story is titled, "Crazy Lady Tries to Call the Police on My Dad's Friend for Being on His Own Property." Now, this happened many years ago and isn't my story, but my stepfather's. It's always given us great laughs when we think back to it, so I thought I'd share. My stepdad was a very intelligent and versatile man. He worked for NASA in his youth. His father, too, taught adults with learning disabilities and eventually retired due to bad health and became a gardener handyman. During this time, he met and worked for a wonderful couple who just so happened to be multimillionaires. Although you wouldn't know it to look at them. They dressed nice, but were always ready to muck in and get their hands dirty when needed. They are salt of the earth people, hard-working, kind, and definitely don't take any crap. The wife swears like a trooper and often dresses down when working in the garden, etc., and will happily pop out to the shops in the same attire. Unfortunately, not long after meeting, the husband was killed in a freak plane crash abroad. He was piloting and testing the plane ready to buy when a freak wind took it and crashed it just after takeoff. He was killed instantly. His wife was obviously devastated and soon became a fast family friend of ours, as my dad helped her with everything in her giant house. Think actually a small stately home with grounds, and around the businesses she still owned, which just so happened to be in one of the most affluent areas in our city. So one day Pam, stepdad's friend and owner, asked my stepdad to help her cut back some bushes and get rid of some rubbish at the back of one of the sections of shops with very expensive apartments on top that she owns. My stepdad, being my stepdad, of course agreed. So off they go and have been there a few hours, cutting down, pruning, bagging up, and getting everything ready to burn in the incinerator. There had been a bit of window twitching from one of the apartments while all this was going on, but they had a big job to do, and they were losing light fast, so they had a deadline they were working to. Now, in my country, it's customary to not have any fires or burn anything until dusk. However, it is not law and doesn't count if on private property. This is important later. So Pam and my stepdad were just filling the incinerator and had set it alight when the window twitcher suddenly burst out onto the balcony and started screaming down at Pam and my stepdad. Pam, owner and Wonder Woman, SD, stepdad. Crazy lady. Crazy lady. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing? I've been watching you for hours now, and you can't be here." "This is private property, my property, SD. Lady, go back inside, please. We're not doing you any harm. We have a job to do here. Just let us work, please." Crazy lady: "No, you're not allowed to be here. You're obviously not from around here. Just look at you. I'm worried you're up to no good." SD: "Look, miss, please let us work. We're losing light, and we'll have to come back tomorrow to finish up if we waste any more time now." Goes to light incinerator again. Crazy lady screams, "No! Stop! How dare you!" You're waiting till it's dark so you can break into my apartment. Plus, it's illegal to have a fire before dusk, so you have to stop. I'm calling the police to report your suspicious behavior and that you're having a fire and destroying my private property. You could never afford anything like this, so just leave and take your rubbish with you. Both of you are trouble, and you, pointing at my stepdad who looks anything but English. He has been mistaken for Arab, Greek, etc. by Arab Greeks all his life. You filthy get away from my apartment. You're not welcome here, even to pick up rubbish. And you, pointing at Pam, you should be ashamed of yourself even being in the company of someone like that. She even started threatening to throw things at them from her balcony to make them move away. Get away from my property. This is my apartment. You need to get away from it. Bear in mind, Pam has kept quiet throughout all this so far. Just keeps cleaning up and shaking her head at this crazy lady's insinuations. The incinerator had started to burn properly now when the crazy lady screamed and started shouting about calling the police and having them arrested. Pam had finally had enough and shouts, Pam, listen here, you crazy ducking idiot. You go ahead and call the police on us. I'll have you arrested for false accusations and harassment. Crazy lady, hi, you have no power here, you scum. I'm calling the police, and you and your friend will be sent back to where you come from. Pam is Caucasian and looks very Caucasian too. Pale skin, white hair, etc. That must have pushed Pam over the edge, as at this she spins around and screamed at the crazy lady. Pam, right now I'm calling the police. You stupid cow. Not only have you harassed us, threatened us, but now you pushed it too far. Listen here, lady, I can burn whatever the duck I want on this property, regardless of the time of day. I'm doing it at dusk to be courteous to you, but you've ducked that now. This is my building. I own the whole thing, including the apartment you're currently sat in. That's right. I'm your landlord. We have been here today cleaning my property because it's overgrown, and you hadn't bothered to do it, even though it's a condition of your lease tenancy contract. So, as a result of the blatant disregard and breaking of your tenancy, plus your disgusting attitude today along with the threats, I feel I may have no option but to not renew your tenancy contract when it expires, which is very soon, and request that you start making other arrangements as soon as possible. The look on Crazy Lady's face was a mix of ashen and red humiliation as Pam removed her hat to reveal the huge diamond stud earrings she always wore, even in the garden, and her signature hairdo. Crazy Lady's face dropped, and she ran inside, slamming the door and pulling down the blind. Pam and SD continued with their work, now pretty much in the dark, but the incinerator was still burning brightly. They both returned the next day to continue with the work they needed doing, and not a peep from Crazy Lady. Pam decided to have an ask-around of the other neighbors of the apartments and the shops downstairs to see if that particular neighbor had been giving anyone else problems. Guess what? She was constantly banging on the floors, shop ceilings, during the days which disrupted the shops, and always banging on the walls of other apartments for no reason during the night. So Crazy Lady's tenancy was not renewed, and she was made to move out not long after the incident. The last story is titled, Made My Life Hell. I'll throw a beeper in your office ceiling. I joined the Army and my first duty station was Okinawa, Japan. It's a beautiful island with awesome people and delicious food. I hated my unit. My 1SG picked on me. My first line was the worst though. She wanted to give me non-judicial punishment and was trying to build a file. The problem is she had nothing on me. So she just badgered me and said all my work was awful while taking credit for all my work. If that makes sense, like I would count people on the island and their status, present for duty, temporary duty, sick leave, regular leave, pass, etc. She would take credit for compiling the report by having me send it to her for her to send to our higher echelon in Hawaii. If someone needed a list, say, of everyone with blue eyes, I could run a query in a system and get that list. I was the master of many aspects, and she took all my credit for me taking time to learn my job properly. If someone needed anything on their record, I would update it. If they needed a file on permanent record, I uploaded it. When the commander needed to know who was coming to the island and who was leaving, I made that list every month. When it was my time to leave, they asked me where I wanted my farewell lunch. I said I didn't want a lunch nor a award. I was leaving one morning to go change after we worked out, and my platoon sergeant asked me what I'm doing for my farewell. I said, I'm not doing crap. He went to my supervisor's supervisor and complained. I was then called into his office. There was my platoon sergeant, my supervisor, and her supervisor. He said, "What did you say this morning?" I said something like, "I'm not doing anything for my farewell." He said, "No, I want the exact words." They were going to give me non-judicial punishment for not wanting a farewell. My commander, who signs the paperwork suggesting punishment, said hell no, because I was leaving in 2 weeks. Non-judicial punishment is one of 4 things up to doing all 4: loss of rank, taking a pay, restricted to base up to 45 days, and extra duty for up to 45 days. It made no sense, honestly, to put in the paperwork on a departing soldier. They forced me to choose a restaurant and put in for the lowest award, Army Achievement Medal, worth 5 promotion points. The base command sergeant major's policy was no one left without anything lower than an Army Commendation Medal, worth 10 promotion points. So I chose the most expensive restaurant. A few people showed up, and they presented my award. They asked me for a speech, and I said, "Remarks complete," and then walked back to my seat. Someone said, "Damn, Sergeant has nothing to say? She must be sick." My officer in command of the area said she'd pay for my lunch. I grabbed my baby from my lieutenant, and I left. I only let her hold my baby so I could be presented an award. I was not wanting anyone there to even touch my child except the Filipino mafia, Filipino soldiers. There were a lot, and they called themselves a mafia. They taught me a lot of dirty Tagalog and some Visayan. I took the award and walked into the commander's office and said it's clear I was given this only because CSM wanted to know why I was leaving without an award. It's the lowest award you can give. He said, "You don't want your paperwork for your records?" I said, "Nope," so I bought a beeping device. It made a few beeping sounds every few minutes. I went into my office early one morning, climbed on top of the filing cabinets, and tossed it over the wall to her office about 3 days before I left. I sat there and listened to those beeps with joy. Another troop in my office kept saying, "WTF is that beeping?" I just soaked it in. She had to listen to it until the battery died, or she was stationed back to the U.S. Should have let me leave silently. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.